Really excited to be here with Jay. Jay's been in software and tech for over 20 years, has a really interesting background, product management, professional services, engineering, customer success, and sales. But many of you probably know Jay as the founder of Gain, Grow, Retain, community for CS professionals, in addition to his role at Higher Logic. So Jay, thanks again for joining us.
Thanks for having me. It's good to see you.
Today we're going to talk about insights from the 9th annual study that Totango's run with around 250 CS professionals. We had 49 industries represented, 41 countries, and really excited to get some insights and hear from you and what you're seeing in the market and within your communities. But let's just set the scene for a little bit. Just as businesses were starting to recover from the disruption caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, or rather I should say as we all got accustomed to that new normal, 2022 threw another curveball at us with some economic and geopolitical uncertainty. So we found ourselves adapting and pivoting yet again, change, right? That's been a theme that we've been talking about the last couple of days. So now there's been this more of a focus on driving that predictable growth. And all eyes are turning to you all. Customer success, right? The team, the mindset, the philosophy. So we're going to talk about the 4 themes we saw emerge from the research. And let's just dive right into number 1, which is what is a priority for the CS team? There we go. So we saw churn reduction, product adoption, and renewals at the top of the list. That's been consistent in our survey over the last couple of years. But you can see we saw quite a big jump in customer experience rising to the top for a priority. And I wonder, Jay, why do you think there's been such a significant 10 percentage point jump here that we see?
Yeah, well, it's always interesting, and by the way, good to see everyone up bright and early at 8:30, the full room. That's pretty special. But yeah, customer experience growing. I mean, these are customer success people that have filled this survey out, right, and that responded here. I think that you have a lot of other leaders and executives in companies like chief marketing officers, chief product officers. They're all really focused on other initiatives, right? Lots of pressure from boards to go drive demand generation and performance marketing and brand on the marketing side. You have lots of pressure on the product side to keep up with technology. One of the things I'm seeing, which is just mind-boggling, is just the level of intensity of the data and InfoSec kind of issues that our team has to deal with every day, and that's what the product teams and the engineering teams are focused on. Somebody has to carry the mantle for customer experience, and I think it ends up being customer success, in a lot of companies, and that's probably why you're seeing the rise of the chief customer officer role as well.
Yeah. I mean, 51% said this year it was a high priority. So the previous slide showed a top two box, but 51% said customer experience is a high priority. I think this really resonates too when we talk about the customer journey as the product, and it's really the culmination of all those interactions along the journey. So if that's a priority, there's also lots of things that are priorities in another way because they're challenging us, and it's things that we're struggling. Last year, what we saw was that scaling the CS team was a top priority for many. But this year, and I wonder if this resonates with you all in the audience, we're starting to see that there's a real challenge in moving away from that reactive approach to customers and trying to be proactive. And so I wonder what you make of that, because the only constant these days is changing customer expectations, changing conditions in the marketplace. So how much does that really require a shift in mindset or a shift in operating model?
Yeah, I think it's both. So as you think about it, it's interesting. I was listening to your podcast last night with Brent on there from Schneider Electric, and just talking about the difference between proactive and reactive. And I think the challenge that we're all going to have, and particularly as the economy continues to change and things tighten up a little bit more, it's funny, everybody's talking about sustainable growth now, and it literally happened in 6 months. Right? You went from growth at all costs to sustainable growth. But we have to resource that. We have to resource the reactive piece, right? The support, the onboarding, the implementation, the things that just have to happen at certain points in the journey so that we can free up other resources to be more proactive. And so I think teams are getting more they're getting more savvy about how to go free up their time and resources to go drive those proactive interactions. But so I think to answer your question, it's both. You got to be scalable, and you got to be what was the other word we were just talking about here? We got our notes. We're cheating a little bit, if that's all right.
Scalable and proactive.
Scalable, yeah, it's got to be scalable and proactive. So when I think about proactive, and we'll probably get into this a little bit more later as well, but it's easy to have a customer success manager go be proactive with a customer on a one-on-one basis, right? That's fine. It's easy for a person to be customer-centric. What's harder is to build a company and processes that scale that are customer-centric. So your business feels customer-centric to your customers. So that's things like, what are your communication strategies? What is your community strategy? How are you bringing customers together? And yes, I'm biased toward community, just to be clear. But what are the things that we're doing to drive scale? Totango, obviously, other platforms that help us use our data to drive those interactions and that engagement at scale. Super important to our ability to be proactive at scale. Yes, we want to hire great teams. Yes, we want to have great relationships. And yes, we want our people in those teams to be customer-centric. But until we can build an operation that's customer-centric, then I think it's hard for your customers to feel that. We have a lot of turnover these days too, right? So just because your CSMs have a great relationship doesn't necessarily mean that's going to last. Both your CSMs are turning over. I don't know, is anybody else seeing that? You got turnover in your business? I mean, we've had more this year in our business than we have in prior years. And customers, your stakeholders are turning over. The people that may have bought your solution. We're seeing a ton of that in our business at least. So how do you free people up on a programmatic basis to go build those new relationships, resell the product, resell the relationship, and keep your customers out of the hands of your competitors, because that's really what it's all about at the end of the day.
Yeah. When you were talking, it made me think a little bit about some of the topics that came up yesterday, and we're talking about shifting from being reactive to proactive. There's also this notion of having to pivot and iterate and test and learn, and so that's a little bit of reacting, or a little bit of being informed by the data and making those changes. So curious how you think about that in the mix, and how we need to iterate and evolve.
Absolutely. I mean, part of what we all have to do as leaders in our businesses, no matter what area of the business you represent, is you have to drive change. And usually change happens incrementally over time. It's sort of a constant push to get a little bit better. I always tell my team, if we can just get 1% better this week, 1% better next week, I mean, you're going to be 50% better by the end of the year. I mean, that's substantial, right? So I think of iterative change is very important to what I'm trying to do at Higher Logic. Sorry, I wasn't supposed to do that. But so iterative change, and that's, again, where platforms come into play. Everything, your people have to change iteratively, your processes have to change iteratively, and your platforms, you've got to be able to adjust and modify and keep change happening all the time. And I think change is a constant now, but I think it's always been constant. I mean, just think what the world was like 50 or 100 years ago. I wasn't alive 50 years ago, pretty close. But the pace of change, I think, is what's accelerating now.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, so keeping up with the pace of change, you talked a little bit about the change in turnover happening. One of the things that we also saw was, we've talked about this before, CS is evolving. There's still a lot of companies here today that we've heard from over the past couple of days that are just getting started, right? And that's fine. Just or as we heard from Warren, don't wait until you have 100% of the information or the data. Just go when you're at 70%. Start trying, iterating, and evolve as you go. So one of the things that we were seeing is the tenure and the size of CS teams has been growing based on the survey. We have a lot more established teams in place, but again, still seeing those enter the mix. And some things that surfaced in terms of how roles in the industry are being described is there's a lot of variety in the terminology being used for customer success manager job descriptions.
Yeah.
The roles that they're expected to play can really run the gamut from that full life cycle, concierge jack of all trades style, to much more specialized teams. So how are you seeing companies think about the role that the CSM plays, or when they need to specialize and change?
Oh man, that is the $1 million question, I think. But first of all, to touch on value, when you think about value, we all work in companies that are working to increase their enterprise value. And enterprise value is essentially how much the company is worth. If you're owned by a venture capital firm, so at some point that business is looking to sell. And it's looking to sell at a multiple higher than what the investors put in it in the first place. Same with private equity, same if you're a publicly traded company, right? You're always trying to increase the value of the business. So, sales has always been a value driver. We know that, right? But as customer success continues to grow in popularity and people understand what it is, and in the subscription environment that you have to have a way to engage and drive expansion within your customer base, that becomes a significant driver. If you look at the S1s, the many companies that are going public right now, they are specifically talking about customer success, and they're specifically talking about their net retention rate. This is like high-level stuff. I know you're probably like, okay, this guy's boring me. But these are real value drivers for real dollars and real business value. As it pertains to what the customer success role actually is, I think that's one of our big challenges as an industry, frankly. There's a lot of variability in how one company views it versus the other. It's getting better. It's gotten a lot better, just I would say, over the past 5 years. People are starting to understand it. But is it, some people take a support team and they rebrand that as customer success. Some people take an account management team and rebrand that as customer success. The reality is there's elements of all those things in customer success, but you have to define that specifically for the outcomes that your company is trying to achieve. So, one of the things I think we all need to be careful of is taking a generic definition of customer success and trying to apply that to your business, because you're probably going to sound a little tone deaf to the rest of your company, to the executives, to your board, unless you really tailor that to the outcome that you're trying to achieve. So that's probably a longer conversation for another day. But as it pertains to the customer success role, I think having a very clear definition of what that is, the responsibilities. Some teams are responsible for renewals. Some are responsible for onboarding and adoption. I worked in a company. One of my first customer success roles, actually, I was thinking about it last night. I met Guy. Where's Guy? I met him like 10 years ago at the Business of Software conference. He probably doesn't even remember me because I was a young punk kid back then. Still am a young punk kid, I think. But, where was I going with that? I was in a $6 million company at the time, and we had already at that small, early stage had started to specialize roles. We had an onboarding and implementation team, we had a support team, and then we had a customer success team. And it was, so even that early in the life cycle, you can begin to specialize. It's hard, right, when you're that small of a company because you've got few numbers and it's hard to give people those responsibilities exclusively. But the smaller you are, the more you have to blur the lines between the roles. But at least know when I'm doing one job versus the other, right, and how related those jobs are. So I think, it's never too early to think about specialization, I guess, to answer your question specifically. We bought a company, HireLogic bought a company called HireLogic, it's now called HireLogic Vanilla is the product, which is a customer community software platform, last May. And it was it was in the low 8 figures when we bought them. And they had what many people are calling like a full stack customer success manager at that point. So they were doing some of the support, but they had started to build a support team, which is cool. But they were doing implementation, they were doing adoption, they were doing renewals. They had renewal responsibility. They were getting comped on renewals. Guess what they spent all their time on? Implementation, because that's what had to be done, right? And before we built a support team, they were spending time on support because that's what had to be done. It's back to the reactive piece. So we split apart those roles pretty quickly. Even though the team was small, we split those roles apart. And in the span of 18 months, we've increased the retention rate by like 12 or 13 percentage points, which is a massive increase. And I'm not going to take all the credit for that because there were some other things we did in the product as well, but those things dovetail together. So I would say it's never too early to think about specialization and how to start bringing that into your customer success organization.
Yeah,
So.
definitely. I think the phrase unicorn came up as well. Maybe Annie mentioned that on one of the panels. But looking for that mix of skills is hard. It becomes even harder when you're looking for a CS-related role in a niche industry.
Oh my gosh.
That really adds to the complexity, right?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that we often, I think, grapple with as CS leaders is, do you hire somebody that has customer success experience, or do you hire somebody that has domain experience? And depending on how big your domain is, you might not have access to that many domain experts, right? So my advice and guidance usually on that is you've got to hire for one and train for the other, depending on the size of your market that you serve and how many of those people are available to you. But both are learnable, you would think.
Definitely. I like to think about that too, just hiring in general as a people leader, that you're looking for potential.
Thanks.
It's so hard to find those unicorns. That's the people that are going to check all the boxes, but how much can you find and then train for or look for that potential and that growth mindset and curiosity for someone to get themselves to that next phase. So let's shift gears a little bit. We've talked about this a lot. I've heard some of our speakers touch on this and the way that their teams and their programs touch different parts of the business. And we saw a nice shift in the way that CS roles are interacting with different parts of the enterprise, right? We talked about CS may be a team, but it's also that mindset, and you can be a customer-centric culture, but how much are your different functions working together, focused on driving customer outcomes, right? Having that shared goal. So one of the things that we saw here was an increase in the amount of time that folks are spending with sales and marketing in particular. And I'm curious how you're seeing that either within your own company or just the broader community that you're engaging with.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm gonna get used to holding a mic now. The whole reason for a SaaS company to exist is customer success. Right? I mean, without that as an outcome, like, how do you sell more business? How do you grow? So, this is not a function. Yes, we have people that live in an org or a department called customer success, but this is really not a function. This is a function of a SaaS company. So it's really encouraging to see that customer success teams are spending more time interfacing with these other parts of the organization. The really interesting thing is sales and marketing to me. I consider customer success, and take this down, like write this down, customer success is part of the go-to-market function, period, full stop, right? Because it influences buyers, it influences revenue from a retention standpoint, and it builds advocates from the company and the business standpoint. It helps build your ecosystem. So a lot of CCOs that I interact with are beginning to pick up responsibility for some of the marketing pieces, because the marketing teams have so much pressure on driving new business and driving lead and demand gen. Somebody's got to pick up and own the customer marketing elements, and I see a lot of that in a lot of cases. That's falling to the chief customer officer or the VP of customer success or the director of customer success, because they're the people who know that that's still got to happen no matter what the pressures are on the other parts of the business. So again, every company is different, but I think the true test of a leader in customer success is how well are you integrating and aligning with the rest of your peers at the executive team level or at the director or whatever level you are. How well are you aligning with the other leaders in your organization to drive all the right outcomes, all the right activities that need to happen for your customers, right? It doesn't have to be just the customer success team doing it, but somebody really has to lead and make sure those things are getting done.
Yeah.
So.
And well, on that point about the go-to-market, I mean, I think about it too. Marketing is often focused on enabling sales, but it's just as important to enable CS. If you've got a new product launch, I know we'll be focused on that based on all the innovations that we shared yesterday. But just to drill into that a little bit more, and you see it up on the chart, 53% of CS professionals said that they're spending half to 3/4 of their time with sales, so a significant amount of their time. And then we also saw that 44% of CS departments are spending around 1/4 of their time collaborating with marketing, and that was an increase by a few percentage points from last year. So definitely a lot more tight partnership across those. And just a reminder, we've got the microphone in the middle of the room, and would love to hear from you all. If you disagree, or if you are grappling with a challenge or would love to pose a question to Jay, please raise your hand, and we'll be happy to weave that into the discussion here. But let's move into something that's very interesting. Whether you work in CS or a partner function, we have seen a really big shift over the last couple of years in where people are working and how they're working, what that's meant, especially when we're all reliant on data, customer data. Yeah. And so I would say that 2 or 3 years ago, this donut chart would look quite different.
Probably the opposite, right?
Probably the opposite. So yeah, we have almost 2/5 of teams now that are working remotely, and in a relationship business, that's a real challenge, not just to build the relationships with your team members, but with your customers. So what do you make of this shift in the way that we're working now?
Yeah, well, I mean, we're still trying to figure it out. I know I'm still trying to figure it out. I'm sure all of you all are still trying to figure that out. But I mean, the data piece is really interesting. I mean, there's a whole nother angle to this, which is just, how do you engage a team? How do you engage customers in this new environment where everybody's distributed? But the bedrock underneath all of that is, what data do you have? Right? This is one reason we're so passionate about community too, is that if you can bring customers together even in this virtual world and have them sort of learning from each other and working together in a way, then it's going to help offset some of the load that's on your CSM team or your people who are individually responsible for maintaining those relationships. But yeah, having access to data, what's happening with the customers in the product, what's happening to what are the customers engaging with from a community perspective, your content from a marketing perspective, what events are they attending of yours, how are they learning and growing, all super important. We won't go too deep into this, but Totango and Higher Logic, we're starting to work together on how do you take community data and maybe surface it in the platform. So super excited about that. We're not ready to go too deep on that, but
watch this space.
Just keep your eye out. You might see something cool there. But so having that data and just having access to what's happening, critical. And in my experience, going out to get that data sometimes is one of the hardest parts of being a customer success leader. I actually heard you talking about it last night, Brent, as I was listening to the podcast. Going to find the data that you need. Is it in a system yet? Is it in a spreadsheet? Is it in somebody's head, on somebody's notebook? You've got to go find the data. And, if you don't have it, that's okay. My recommendation would be to start simple. So if you don't have health scores, start as simple as you possibly can with sort of like a red, yellow, green health pulse check from your CSMs for your top tier accounts, right? Don't try to boil the ocean out of the gates. But yeah, I think as we continue to see this shift, having access to what customers are actually seeing, feeling, experiencing from your products and your company is really important. The other side of it is, how are we collaborating together with our teams? We have so many tools. It shouldn't have taken a pandemic for us to use a Google Doc to collaborate on an agenda, like we did, right? But for a lot of us, it did, right? It took a pandemic to really force us to use these tools. We have amazing tools at our fingertips. One of our customers is Mural. Do you know that company, Mural? Mm-hmm. It's a collaboration design tool, and it allows you to basically map processes and do brainstorming and mind mapping with a team virtually. Very, very cool product. But there are tons of products like that out there. We all have access to many of them in our companies. And so as this continues to be our reality, how do we leverage that? And it's really more about
It's also about giving our teams an environment that's workable. How many people are in too many Zoom meetings? I'm in too many Zoom meetings still. But these collaboration tools, I think, if we manage and use them well, are a way for us to break out of the funk of just having to sit in Zoom call after Zoom call. Like, we need time to think and work. We are knowledge workers.
Yep.
That's really what we are. And relationship builders. And so we need to be able to break out from that and think and write and collaborate with our peers asynchronously. So
yeah. And it's funny, we were talking about that at breakfast with some folks at the table, right? If anyone knows the magic number for how many Zoom meetings it takes to build a connection with a team member, please let us know. But it's events like this, and it's opportunities where we get to bring our teams together, even if it's just once a quarter or once or twice a year. Those are the moments when the magic can happen, when you really can spark different conversations, not just about the projects you're working on, what you're collaborating on for work, but you get to know the humans that you're working with. And I just want to thank everyone that I've talked to the last couple of days. Just hearing those stories about your personal lives as well as your professional challenges has really just created some great bonds so that you can work together well over a Zoom or in person, or find ways to be more comfortable collaborating asynchronously.
Can I say one more thing about that?
Please, yeah.
This is like, we don't work in technology companies. We don't work in software businesses. We work in people businesses. Mm-hmm. This is 95% people, right? And you know that just in the composition of your teams. Look at the diverse set of people that it takes to launch a product and to make it work and to support a customer and to drive customer outcomes. You've got product, you've got engineering, you've got sales, marketing, customer success. There are so many different personality types embedded in those different roles. If we aren't good people leaders, if we aren't good teammates to people, then things are going to suffer, right? And in the best companies that we work with, and you can see it, all of us have clients, right? You can look across your customer base and see the dysfunctional ones are usually the ones that are going to churn out because they don't know how to work together to utilize your technology. So anyway, this is people business. It's not technology.
100%. 100%. Oh,
I just wanted to actually provide some input. With my company, it was really, I found a lot of success in the onboarding process, being a remote worker, coming in for my onboarding in person. And then, or like we would have a team session where we would, actually, like when I first came on, we had a brainstorming session in person, all of our team, and I found that the more we add to our CS team, the more we strategically bring them on board when we can meet in person and collaborate together. And I just want to get your opinion on that. So.
Well, I think that's a great way to accelerate onboarding. And, I have to share my own personal experience. As Jamie mentioned, I've been at Totango about 60 days. And my second week, I was really fortunate to have the marketing team come together to our office in California, and I got to meet everyone in person. We spent a couple of days together. More than that, our CS team leads had come to town for their own training and collaboration session. So they worked separately. We had a marketing session, and then we came together as a team. We did some fun activities. We went bowling, we had dinner together, and that really made for a difference because, as I said earlier, or asked earlier, I don't know how many Zoom meetings it would have taken for me to learn about the team or to develop that comfort, as someone new joins a team, to have the trust, to be comfortable collaborating, to know how to communicate. So I think it's really important, and the sooner that can happen in someone's onboarding, I think the better, right?
Onboarding is important for customers, and it's onboarding for our teammates.
Yeah.
And it's important. We do have to think about, some companies will not spend to do what you just said, right? They won't spend the money to bring people together. So how can we try to recreate those experiences, even if virtually? But that onboarding matters so much in customers and in employees and teammates. Yeah.
Definitely.
You're doing pretty well, by the way. Like 60 days in, I'm impressed.
Well, thank you. Thanks. I have to give a lot of credit to you all as well, because I've had a lot of conversations with our customers as I've onboarded. Just, as part of our customer advisory board, hearing some of you do your preparations for the fantastic sessions. So thank you. Love learning from all of you as well. So
When I joined Higher Logic, it was July of 2020, so literally everything locked down. And I'm sure many of you joined companies in the middle of the pandemic as well. We actually did a customer listening tour. And we went and talked to, we got on Zoom and talked to 50 customers in 50 days. And that was like mind-blowing what we learned just by having that level of intensity for a short amount of time. And actually, we did it in like 25 days. So it was a lot, but it was a great way to get indoctrinated. So maybe that's one of the virtual ways you could pull off the same if you don't have the luxury of meeting people face-to-face.
Yeah, you can never spend too much time with your customers,
right.
no matter what function or role you're in.
That's right.
All right, well, let's shift gears into hiring challenges. So we will have this report available on our website, and it goes much deeper into the salary ranges that we're seeing for some of the roles too. Offering competitive salaries, we know that's been a challenge. I mean, the last couple of years has been such an interesting talent market in general. We've heard about the Great Resignation, the Great Reshuffle. Unfortunately, this year we've seen a lot of layoffs or downsizing. So it's just been a real roller coaster of a market. The other thing that we're seeing is some fewer applicants overall, or you're sometimes seeing that there's fewer qualified applicants, and I think we touched on that earlier, just in terms of what does that job description look like? Are you looking for unicorns? Are you clear maybe on the expectation of outcomes that they're trying to deliver? So what do you make of that and some of the hiring challenges that we're seeing in the results here, or that we've touched on earlier?
I think this is always a challenge. I mean, it's definitely a challenge now, but it's always a challenge. You always get more applicants for roles that they think they might be qualified for it, but in actuality they're not. So, but it is definitely more pronounced. And as the labor market goes up and down, it sort of swings one way to the other, right? You get more applicants than you can filter out. And then when the labor market gets tight, it's like you're going out and trying to market to people, and you'll actually relax your constraints. But what I've found most helpful, and I've done a lot of hiring over the years, is, and I've not always gotten it right, just to be clear, but is to be very specific with the criteria that you're using for your role. So it goes back to what we talked about a little bit earlier. Don't just grab I'm sure Totango and other companies have like the template customer success manager job description, right, on the website that you could go grab. I mean, maybe start with that, but make sure you tailor that. Build a scorecard that says, I feel like I need somebody that has experience handling, let's call it renewals, or experience, with product adoption and training. Whatever those hard, like non-negotiable things are, what are the 3 or 4 things that you just cannot live without? How many years of experience? What level of experience? What level of customers? That's another thing. If you're an enterprise business and you have enterprise customers, you probably need customer success managers who have worked with enterprise customers before, right? This all sounds like motherhood and apple pie as I hear it coming out of my own mouth, but you've really got to be specific when you're in the hiring phase. I have always, in all the teams that I've worked with, no matter what the function is, I've always tried to build a really strong relationship with my recruiting leaders and my recruiters. So helping calibrate them and help them understand what they're looking for from your perspective. They're really hungry for your input. So if you're just getting a bunch of stuff from HR and then you're sending stuff back and saying yes, no, and you're not talking to them, you're probably not doing it right. You're probably not doing it right.
Right.
Because there's nothing more important in most of our jobs than hiring the right people. So yeah, I would say, get specific, work really closely with those recruiting teams. Just know you're going to get a bunch of top of funnel kind of stuff that may not work for your business, and then really clamp down on those criteria that you're looking for. And then, the other side of hiring is maybe you're not finding people with all those qualifications. What does your enablement program look like? Even if it's, you don't have a full-time enablement person, or maybe you're using some of your sales enablement to help drive training and awareness of your customer success team, you got to do something there. So figure out what you need to augment in terms of training and learning. Maybe it's domain, maybe it's customer success experience, or certainly product experience. Most people probably will not come into your business with product experience, but just be prepared to handle the enablement piece of it.
Yeah. Well, and on that point of hiring being so important, and to what we talked about earlier with being proactive, I like to think that I'm always hiring. I'm always having conversations with people or prospective talent, because you never know what's going to be needed as your company, your team is scaling. It's really great to just constantly create those connections, as you're going to potentially need more specialization. So that's something that I like to think about a lot in terms of leading.
Such a good point. Like, if you're an executive leader, you should have people in your back pocket who you could pull the trigger on at any point in time and bring them in when you have the right opportunity. Keep them warm. That's what community is all about. That's what, networking is all about. And so I couldn't agree with that anymore.
Cool. Well, the other thing too that's interesting, and we've heard some of you talk about it in the sessions over the last day or so, is just some of the new titles and roles that are also emerging. I think Journey Mapper was one that came up, and I thought that was interesting. We're seeing CS Insights professionals, heads of digital engagement or digital enablement, especially with high and low touch programs or mid touch. So have you seen anything interesting in terms of new roles or titles emerging on the scene?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know that these are new jobs per se, but there are some new titles. But it all has to do with scale. So, program manager or scaled operations manager. Really, it's encouraging to see us hiring people that are focused on one-to-many programs as bedrock. One of the things that I think about a lot, and I tend to talk about a lot, like when I'm on LinkedIn and stuff, is I think the customer success world, especially now as people are getting more focused on not just the top line revenue growth, but the profitability of our businesses and the sustainability without having to go raise another round of funding. I think we might be in for a little bit of a reckoning, right? Customer success has been very one-to-one focused for many, many years. A lot of it's relationship building, and I'm not suggesting we do away with that. We need high-touch relationships, one-on-one relationships with our customers. But go back to the turnover, both in our customer environment and our CSM teams, all of our teams. You've got to have a relationship with your customer that goes beyond that CSM. You just have to. And that's where these roles come in to play, right? The insights manager drives, the behaviors to the team that is driving content into the hands of all the customers and helping them learn, helping them connect with one another. So, to me, customer success has to continue to grow up and not just be a brute force mechanism to build relationships with customers, but use these new roles, these new levers. We actually, in the first year that I was with Higher Logic, we actually we didn't cut anybody, but we pared down our CSM team in terms of new hiring, and we actually changed some of the roles. So instead of hiring another customer success manager, we actually hired scaled programs manager that would go out and help us coordinate and drive that content and the interactions and the interactivity with broad numbers of customers all at the same time. One quick story, our CSMs are doing this too. So we have a team of CSMs who manage enterprise customers for one of our products, and they recently, the CSMs did this, launched an office hours call. And an office hours call, and many of you may do these, but it's an open invitation with a topic, and you bring 50, 60 customers together at one time to have an open discussion about it. It doesn't have to be about your product. It could be about a common process that people are struggling with, or a common issue that people are struggling with. It's best practice, it's community, right? And so even having your customer success managers adopt that mindset in addition to the one-on-one relationship building, the account management strategies that they're coming up with, going to be super important in the future, I believe.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, office hours, ask me anything. We do that ourselves. Ryan, I think, hosts some of those. Yep, there you are. And Morgan talked about that, I think, through TaskRabbit. Such an interesting use case because you're talking about one-to-one. I mean, that was a high touch at high volume story. So
I love that, high touch at high volume.
Yeah.
That's powerful.
I think what the takeaway that we've been hearing is really the importance of investing in the digital relationships and automation as a foundation, and then finding new and creative ways to add on that human touch, that one-to-one. So. Yeah.
Digitally led, human augmented, yeah, is how I've heard it, but I didn't come up with that, but it sounds pretty cool.
It does sound cool. And that sounds like maybe a good place for us to kind of wrap up our fireside chat. And thank you so much.